Welcome to Hameen Royale. This is Eric Grissom.
And I'm Dan Johnson. Eric and I will be rewatching the iconic Twin Peaks from the pilot through the return and everything in between.
If this is your first time watching, or if you're a longtime fan, you can watch along with us as we dive deep into the strange and wonderful world of Twin Peaks.
We live inside a dream.
Friends, today on a very special episode of Meanwhile, I am joined by Mark Frost, the Mark Frost, co-creator of Twin Peaks, the entire reason that I'm talking to you now, although my parents may take issue with some of that, but they're not even talking anymore. I got to talk to Mark Frost. And what a delight that man is. We had a great time, originally scheduled for 45 minutes. The man is a prince. We went beyond that, and really had a good time talking with him. I hope that you enjoy our chat and that I ask questions you'll be happy hearing. And the answers, I know, will fill your hearts with love. So without further ado, let's just get to it. Let's get right into the Red Room. And let's talk to Mark Frost. Author, director, and Twin Peaks co-creator Mark Frost has been out and about promoting the release of his acclaimed historical fiction novel, The Yankee Sphinx, which accounts his great-uncle Will Hassett's time advising FDR. It's a fantastic novel. It's available right now wherever fine books are sold. And you know what else is available right now? Mark Frost. I'm looking at him right now. Good morning, Mark Frost. Welcome to Meanwhile.
Good morning, Eric. It's nice to be with you this morning.
To get started, I want to kind of go back in the past, if we could, to the young Mark Frost of yesteryear, turn the clock back a bit. Now, when I'm looking up sort of research on you, it seems like you've moved quite a bit, where you were born in Brooklyn, then also in California and Minnesota. Could you tell me a little bit about where you grew up?
Yeah, we were a bit nomadic because of my parents' bohemian artistic nature. They were both theater majors in college at Middlebury, and they were aspiring actors. My dad worked in live television in the early days in New York as the stage manager of Philco Playhouse.
The Philco Television Playhouse,
which was one of the 3 live drama shows that was on every week. And then the New York television industry started to disperse and move west. And we went with that diaspora out here to the West Coast in, I think, fall of 1958, if I'm not mistaken. I was about to turn 5. Then we were here until, I think, all the way through my middle school years, but we moved quite a bit. So I was in a different school with some frequency. And then he was going to get his PhD and become a member of the faculty at the University of Minnesota. So we moved to Minnesota in the summer of what I think it was 1968.
That's your high school years about?
Then I lived my high school years in Minneapolis. I went to college at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh. I then moved back to the West Coast after my junior year, started working in television. Then went back and spent 4 more years in Minnesota, working as a playwright in the Midwest and at the Guthrie Theater in Minneapolis. And then finally, I moved back here in 81 for good. And soon afterwards, went to work on Hill Street Blues for my mentor, Stephen Bochco.
What about the safe deposit box?
We're picking up the warrant in an hour. Meeting at the bank.
You let me know as soon as it's done.
Do you think like moving around as much as you did fed into a desire to create your own worlds? I mean, it seems like that's a common thing too with reading David Lynch's biography as well. Like he seemed to be moving around a lot from his father, and you have the same experience. Do you think that fed into it?
I do, because my everyday world was not constant or reliable in that way. I wasn't growing up with the same bunch of kids from year to year, and I think that did feed a desire, number one, to tell stories, which I was drawn to from a really early age, um, and also to world build. I mean, that was one of the things that drew me to literature, and to certain ambitious movies and television shows where there was a universe that seemed real to me. That was why I became such a fan of Tolkien in my uh, early teenage years. The world building he did in that universe inspired me no end. Um, but lots of books did. You know, I was reading James Fenimore Cooper and Alexander Dumas and Jules Verne and lots of 19th century novelists. Um, and that's how I kind of fed my imagination, and taught it to have an insatiable appetite. And that led directly to, my desire to tell stories and share that as, I think, part of my DNA.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, for myself, like I moved a number of times. I think we moved like 8 times before I was in 18 years old. We never left the same zip code, though. It was mostly from divorces. So it was like all the worst parts about moving without the great location changes
Yeah.
that you were getting. But yeah, I feel like there is definitely a desire to create the world. Not so much that there's a control over it, although I think that feeds into it a little bit. But
Mhm.
it's nice to kind of get lost in those kind of stories. You talked already a little bit about your dad and your family, like literally your new book. You've got your great uncle. He's a journalist. He's a speechwriter as well as an advisor to FDR. Your dad, Warren, obviously we love him as Doc Hayward.
Why am I stop at the hardware store to get those 60-watt bulbs?
He's a theater teacher. He's an actor. He's a director. Your sister is an actress, Lindsay. Your brother, Scott, is a photographer, writer. Like, you're from a art family, clearly. You mentioned your mom was also involved in the theater. What was she, an actress, writer, director, or
And it's my opinion that she was actually the best actor in the family.
really?
Yeah. I didn't learn until after they were both gone, that my parents, when they left Middlebury, moved to New York, had been doing a lot of summer stock theater, both auditioned for the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts in London. My mom was accepted and my father wasn't. And this was just before I was born. And the thinking back then was, well, you do what the dad wants to do. So he didn't want to move to London while she was going to the Royal Academy. So we stayed in Brooklyn. And, that could have been a very different life path.
But it sounds like so art, whether it's performance, writing, or what have you, was a big formative part of your life, your family's life. I take it that it was encouraged. Everyone was kind of pushed in that direction.
Yeah, and I was my own development. I was fascinated by the mechanics of the typewriter when I was very young. It seemed to me magic that you had a machine where you could just hit a key and make a word appear, or a letter initially. So I started teaching myself how to type when I was about 8 years old, and I would do it by retyping newspaper articles. And I would create the columns. There was just something enormously satisfying about this for me. And then I realized, okay, well, now I want to start telling my own stories. And so I ended up launching into and writing a novel when I was 11. And I still have it. It's not anything you want to read, but um, another one at 13 in eighth grade, and then a third as an English project in 10th grade. I talked my English teacher into giving me the semester off if I went and wrote a novel.
That's
Uh,
amazing.
those were the days.
Yeah. Well, that was similar for me at 15. Like, that's when your show aired, Twin Peaks. So
Mm.
it was a huge inspiration. And it was like convincing the teacher that, oh, no, what I have to make a film for this particular project, even though maybe it's not even loosely related, but whatever you can do to get to be making art and
Yeah,
creating
and
things.
because I knew that that was what I wanted to do. Um, the rest of high school that wasn't related to the arts didn't have a whole lot of relevance for me. I didn't. I mean, I understood the purpose of it for people to create an educational base that would allow you to function and thrive in the real world. I mean, I there was plenty of benefit to that, but I knew I was going to be doing this, so I started to uh, really resent the time that school was taking away from that, and I was lucky enough to get into a high school intern program at the Guthrie Theater in my sophomore year, and I ended up getting fully, actually more than half of my credits to graduate outside of the school. Uh, and I was hardly ever seen there again after that. I was spent every afternoon in what was essentially a professional theater uh, conservatory. That's what it became. I was doing work that most people wouldn't get until they were in college when I was at that age. So it was a very easy um, launch for me in that regard.
Right. And it's nice too that you can look at your parents who are doing this. They're acting there. You see it as a viable path
Yeah,
where, some people that have, if your parents were accountants or whatever, I think you'd probably still end up being a writer. But it's nice to see that this is a path that you could do.
yeah, and because you're attracted to the writings of various people as you grow up, and your taste change as you get older, but you start to get a sense of their biographies and how they came to the craft of writing and the art of telling stories. Um, so everything becomes inspirational in that regard. And I was attracted to all forms. I loved live theater, I loved film, I loved TV, and I loved prose. I loved novels. So that's sort of been a keynote to my life, is that I haven't really cared what the medium was. When I got attracted to a story, I would figure out what medium could tell it best, and then I would use that medium to tell it.
So fast forwarding a little bit, like before Twin Peaks, though, you start working with David Lynch on that Marilyn Monroe Goddess,
Yeah,
right? The adaptation, and then you do One Saliva Bubble. I know the both of you wrote that script at one point.
yeah.
It was going to get made, and I've heard Steve Martin and
Marty Short.
Marty Short were going to do it, and then things went south. But would you ever revisit that and try to make that project?
Well, the rights reverted to David. We did this. He had a deal at Dino De Laurentiis Studios where he had made Blue Velvet, and before that Dune. And we were, I believe, a month away from the start of pre-production on that film when Dino went bankrupt, and therefore the project went poof, and the rights reverted to David. So that would be entirely up to his estate at that point. I mean, I have a copy of the script, and it's really funny, but it's also 40 years ago.
Right.
Um,
Is are you attracted at all to unrealized older ideas that you have?
Not usually. Um, I find I mean, some, yes, some that have persisted. Um, More from solo works I might have done, like books like The List of Seven, I would still love to see as a movie someday and even come close 5 times, but, it's just we have a saying that almost everybody's familiar with, but when things don't work out, you just go, "Well, that's show business." And, I mean, it applies to all sorts of industries, but in particular, this business, because things can go south or sideways for an astonishing number of reasons. You know, and, and you just can't fight it. You just have to say, "Hey, wasn't meant to be," you know?
Right.
Otherwise, you will live a life of regret and woe, and goodness knows there's enough of those folks on the West Coast. So, um, yeah, that was not my attitude.
Twin Peaks comes the two of you work on that project together. I mean, clearly I can see connections to Marilyn Monroe. So you're working on sort of the goddess story. Some of that seems to naturally fuel the idea for Laura Palmer and some of the darker elements of Twin Peaks, especially the Horn brothers and the Kennedys. But
Mhm.
I've also heard that there was a personal story for you when you were in middle school that involved your friend's sister. Would you share that story with us?
Yeah, this was 8th grade. We were still in California, and my dad had a close friend who he had worked for a while. He was a real estate broker. He had a firm in Glendale, California, where we were living at the time, and we were close family friends. Um, and he was the guy's name was Ray Freshy, and we loved him. He was a very flamboyant, handlebar mustache, Jaguar XKE, season tickets to the Trojans and the Rams and the Lakers. I mean, he was like Christmas, just hanging out with him. And he had a son, Sandy, who was a year younger than me, and a daughter, Susan, who was a year older. And we were very close. We spent a lot of time with them. They lived in La Cañada, Flint Ridge, which is adjacent to Pasadena. Um, and we were one city over in a place called, well, Glendale, right near. So Susan had gone away to boarding school in British Columbia, and one horrible weekend, my parents took me aside. I'm not even sure they told my brother what was going on. They had gotten devastating news that Susan had been murdered by an escaped convict at her school. She had, I guess, wandered away from campus or was waiting for, I don't recall the exact circumstance, but it was dreadful. And they were going back to British Columbia to bring back her remains. And Sandy spent the weekend with us, and he didn't know. And I wasn't supposed to tell him, and I didn't.
Yeah, what a heavy load for you at that time.
It was it was a lot. I mean, nowhere near the burden they were carrying, let's be clear about that, but, um, shocking because Susan was a delight. She was a beautiful girl. I had kind of a crush on her, and, it was devastating. And when I saw then the effect on the family and the ripples that went out across the pond of that community, it was senseless, it was random, it was stupid, and it was horrifying. And it left a mark on certainly the family, but also on me. Um, and I when this all came up, that was the first story I told David about I had this experience and I had things that I could draw on. I'd never written about it, and I felt that was, a place to start this story.
Yeah, I mean, you can feel that, especially that first season of Twin Peaks. The grief, I think, is the key word and how that's handled
Yeah.
and how it affects all the people. And it's one of the best tellings of grief that I had ever seen, certainly when that came out, and it still holds up. But were you aware, casting your father as Doc Hayward, like the parallel that you're setting up? And I wonder,
Mm.
how your father felt to be playing a character whose friend loses a daughter, whose own kids are connected. And that you just said the person's name was Ray, so it's Ray playing Leland. So that first moment of your dad as Doc Hayward seeing the body, like what those kind of emotions would come up for him.
We talked about that, and that was the very first day of shooting that scene. It was on, as I recall, on Bellingham, one of the islands. It wasn't out near Snoqualmie. That giant log, it's still there. It's still on the tourist site list, and yeah, he, we he mentioned it that day, and I said, well, use that.
So your dad, I said, is playing Doc Hayward. Your brother writes 2 episodes. He writes the autobiography. He writes the Diane tapes. I know your son appeared in The Return.
Yeah.
And it's a thing that about Twin Peaks that I love. I've talked about it at length. It's family and friends making things together. David Lynch's kids are involved. Is that important for you for including your family in your art?
Yeah, we felt. I mean, I'd always felt that way. I'd always been had done things with my family, and it felt just natural. This was not a job for hire. This was a labor of love, and it was entrepreneurial. David and I owned the show. We were working for ourselves, and the people that you trust the most and the people that are closest to you, I found, are the people that you then want to have around. And it was true for him too. We had Jennifer was around. His son Riley was all around during the making of the return. um, it was a family affair, and we encouraged that kind of feeling and ethos. And I think our our group, our our it was a very collegial group of people, and we went through some amazing experiences together. So it's a bond that's lasted all these years. When we came back to do the return, it was like the ultimate college reunion, 25 years later. It was magical, and everybody felt it. And I think it imbued that third season with a very special kind of feeling for everybody who was involved.
Oh, absolutely. And it just jumps off the screen. And even like you mentioned the Guthrie, like how Bob Engels talked to me about, taking classes with your dad and then pulling actors out of the Guthrie. So there's people that, that you've worked with and you've known forever. And it creates a wonderful environment. And I think when you're working with people that you're friends with or family with, they're also going to be honest with you about situations where other people may not, as far as like feedback and everything else. And I think it goes a long way to. It may be controversial, but nepotism I think is fantastic in the world of art.
Yeah. I was just reading about this, that the word nepotism is from the word nepote, which I believe is either the Greek or Italian word for nephew. Uh, And it was literally how things worked in ancient Rome when you were doing patronage in the arts. Why wouldn't you hire your nephew if he was Michelangelo, or Brunelli, or some amazing Renaissance talent? It has kind of a bad name.
It does, yeah. And maybe it's not the right word because it has such a negative connotation, but it is a positive thing.
I mean, it's the way a lot of people work. The Coppolas, the Barrymores. I mean, you like to work with people you trust, and hopefully you trust your family more than you trust anybody.
Yeah, somebody, I can't remember the interview, but someone once asked Orson Welles that question, like, have you ever hired a friend over the best person for the role or something like that? And he was like, of course, every time. And they were like, have you regretted? He said, yes, and I would do it again and again and again. And to me, that's how you should do it.
The actual making of a television show or a movie is a very tough physical and emotional and mental task, as you undoubtedly know. It's grueling, and you don't want to be at war with the people you're doing that kind of work with. You want to be in sync if you can help it. And that has to do a lot to do with who you select going into the process to do it with.
You know what else is grueling? Is I imagine appearing on Donahue after season 1 has aired and someone in the audience suggests they know who the killer is.
Just tell me yes or no. Did Laura's father kill Laura? Because that's my theory.
Definitely maybe.
Yes.
And you handled yourself very well, deflecting different theories and stuff like that.
I certainly have always felt like I could play poker, and poker face. We played a lot of poker in my family. It was a way we did things for fun. It was a family activity, just, penny ante games. But yeah, you learn to play your cards, hold your cards close to your vest. And I was certainly doing it that day on the Donahue show. That was pretty funny.
So I don't want to rehash stuff that's already been talked about many times, like obviously the network forcing you guys to reveal the killer. I know neither one of you wanted to. You wanted to prolong it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But what I haven't heard talk about all that much is what the reaction was to it being Leland and all the implications about it being her father. And do you think that that led them to, one, moving you to a terrible night of the week Saturday, and also seemingly like getting rid of Ray Wise as soon as the thing was over? Like, we didn't even want to look. That's how it felt as a viewer. Like, all of a sudden it was just over. Do you think, well tell me, how was their reaction to the identity, not just that they wanted to know?
I don't recall, because we had told them, look, we're going to make the show our own way. We don't have a studio to answer to. Sure, you can give us notes. Feel free. I'm going to, both of us, we're going to be under no obligation to execute them the way you want. You got into the hole you're in as the worst network for the last 5 years because of what you were doing, not what we were doing. And you hired us to break the mold and try to do something different to bring people back to your network. So why are you doing this? I mean, I would get into these sort of sophist kind of dialogues with these folks every now and then. And look, they were corporate employees and they were just doing a job. And we were committed filmmakers making something that we knew how to do. So, just go away. you Mel Brooks had the most wonderful advice about, and I've known him a long time. He said, if you get network or studio notes, just say yes to everything and then feel absolutely no obligation to do any of them.
Right. Well, maybe that they just need that yes to feel like they've done whatever they have to do, and then they'll forget about it.
They can check the box off on their time card or whatever they're doing. That's their job, to grease the wheels of a corporate machine. And they really resent it when you try to put sand in the gears.
I want to talk a little bit about Agent Denise Bryson, played by David Duchovny. I don't think it was the first trans character on television, but it's certainly the first one that I saw.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, what makes her introduction so great is not what is said, but what is not said.
It's a long story, but actually I prefer Denise, if you don't mind. Okay.
Yeah.
And I've always heard she was your contribution. So could you tell us anything about where that character came from?
Well, as you know, we were stuck in this kind of a little bit of limbo because we'd had to wrap up the Laura case. So, we stretched it out as long as we could. It was, I think, the 9th or 10th hour of the second season. And we had a plan to do a short-term bridge story over 3 episodes that I won't go into, but it didn't come together. And so we needed some new elements and some new blood and some new people involved. So one of the things we worked on was this sting operation.
Of all the people in the world, the best and the worst are drawn to a dead dog.
We wanted to kind of finish that story. I came up with this idea of, what if Dale had a very close friend who he'd gone to the academy with, who had come out as trans in the meantime and was now living kind of in between, but trending toward that life. And I thought, yeah, let's delineate that. Let's just tell it like it is. And it's the truth is, you're still the same person in some ways. You're still fundamentally the same person. David Duchovny came in and was perfect for the role. He's such a great guy. And as I recall, he had not booked any jobs. He'd come out of Yale drama and he had all sorts of cred, but he hadn't been able to crack it. And I remember Joanna Ray sent him in to meet with me, and I just liked him instantly. And I said, I think you can do this, and I'd like to give you a shot. And he was fantastic. He and Kyle had great chemistry. And so just in the same way that we didn't want to make a big deal about the character and how people reacted, we didn't put that into the story. We just said, this is who she is, and everybody's going to accept that at face value.
Yeah. And that's the wonderful part about it. Cooper is just like, okay. And
yeah,
that's it.
It's your life. It's your business. I'm good with it. I've got a pre-existing relationship with you that supersedes anything I might feel about what you're doing. And that's the way it should be.
Did you bring her back as well? Was it your idea to bring her back for the return?
Yeah, I said we've got to bring Denise back, and I would love to bring her back as the head of the FBI. I think that would be tremendous.
Right, because the Fix Your Hearts or Die, I mean, it's on bumper stickers at this point. Like, it's a very well-known thing. It's a great scene.
And when you became Denise, I told all your colleagues, those clown comics, to fix their hearts or die.
It's a great scene. David's wonderful in it. Both Davids are wonderful in it. And it really mattered to people. As you know, vis-a-vis the thing you just mentioned, that one phrase has become a kind of a cri de coeur for people who are trans. That what is wrong with you people? What's the big deal? That was the thing we wanted to reinforce.
So after Twin Peaks airs, you do On the Air. I think that's a fantastic show. I've been rewatching it, but for whatever reason, the time ABC just the part of the populace at the time just didn't take to it. But I'm curious to know about you when you look back on it. Do you look back on it fondly? What's your impression of that? I guess that time period in that show.
Yeah, sure. It's kind of an axiom in show business that how a particular thing did in the world invariably colors how you feel about it. And although we had a lot of fun making it, particularly the pilot and writing it, it was based in part on the stories that my dad had told me about those live days of television, all of the crazy things that could go wrong. That was sort of a seed of the show, and David loved that idea, and we ran with it. And, the show is pretty outrageous. It's not by any means a sitcom in any traditional way.
No, it's ahead of its time. Like it's absurdist.
Why don't we just have you picking fur off the Easter Bunny with the Hurry Up Twins? McGonagall!
The Hurry Up Twins.
Like hurry up. Like hurry up.
It doesn't often pay in a conservative medium like television to be that far ahead of your time. And that was certainly a case of that, I think. It was, it was fun to do. And then ABC chased it around with a hatchet until they killed it. I mean, it was like they couldn't wait for that show to go away. It was shocking.
Do you think it could have a second life as like a release, like a Blu-ray or some kind of official?
About that with CBS Paramount quite a lot, and I don't know why it hasn't shown up in any of our releases because it's a natural. The episodes are done; they're sitting there. They're not. All they're doing is collecting dust. Why not monetize them? So, who knows?
I don't know how I would help, but if I could help, I will. I think it's got to get out there. It shouldn't get forgotten. Like it needs to, and the audience is there. You have a ton of fans. Obviously, David has a ton of fans. Like it's good work that most people haven't seen, and I feel like it could get a second life.
Yeah, I agree with you, and never say never.
Welcome to the halfway point of Meanwhile. I hope you're enjoying my conversation with the one and only Mr. Mark Frost. Of course, we got to take time, even in an interview with the scope of the Mark Frost interview, to thank our Black Lodge supporters, Chuck Suffel and Gregory Flanagan, and my sister Dawn Adamo, and Banjo Track, Eric Knopp, Charlie Tapper, Jake Jagello, Matthew Fuller, David Melito, Daryl Dyson, Dana Gould, Jeff, Henrik E., Concluding Remarks, Brian Johnson, Meerkats, Raga Raven, Evan Fitz, Hazel Haywood, Ivan, William Schaefer, Jordan Carver, Matt W., Nick Webb, Kalen Best Lawrence, He Who Is Clem Fandango, a.k.a. Luke P., Arthur Hill, Eva, Ben Chisholm, Neil McKenzie, David Titterington, Ethan Berry, and May Surkoff. Thank you to each and every one of you for supporting the show and keeping us going. And let's get back to it. Let's get right back to my talk with Mark Frost. Well, speaking of things coming back, You just hit 9 years since the return, which is wild to think about. I think that was only a few days ago. What brought you back to that world?
Well, I started to feel, I remember seeing David, we'd get together and have a cup of coffee like once a year, twice a year. And it was around 2007. I think the Gold Box edition had just come out, and at-home DVD watching was peaking at that moment, and it just hit. That edition of the DVD really is what caught the second wave of interest in the show that had been kept alive by the fans for all those years, those 15 years. And at that point, I started to look at it as a possibility that we could bring it back someday. So I just started thinking on my own about, stories that I'd had in mind for what we were going to do with our season 3, some of which are in the return. And then I thought, well, there's more we can do. And I called David up, and it was around this time of year in 2012. And we would always have lunch at Musso and Frank's, the famous Hollywood eatery on Hollywood Boulevard. It was because it was close to his house, and we both loved the history. I'd been going there since I was 8 years old. So we had a lunch, and I pitched the idea to him, and he was intrigued. He wasn't ready to immediately, jump in, but he said, let's have another lunch. I think we had 3 of them altogether before we found our way to like shaking hands and say, okay, we're going to do this. And the deal was, we're going to do it ourselves. We're going to write it ourselves. He wanted to direct all the episodes, which I thought was fantastic. And we'd produce it, and we're not going to even tell anybody we're writing it. We're just going to write it. And so that's what we did for almost 2 years, a year of talking and thinking and story creating and world and universe expanding, and then a year of drafting it, and then, refining it. And we didn't even chop it up into episodes. We just had one big honking.
Hundreds and hundreds of pages, right?
I have it somewhere, and I don't recall exactly how many it was. It was somewhere between 400 and 600, I think.
I imagine in the beginning, you're crafting a master kind of outline that's the skeleton of the beast, right?
Yes. And all these disparate threads and how they fit together. And it was, a long time coming. And we knew we had this 25-year window, this anniversary that we wanted to hit. So that was the kind of our benchmark in terms of timing. And it all worked out. It was my idea. Netflix had been starting to do shows. Streaming wasn't really kind of taking root just yet the way it has now. And because we had done all this work with CBS Paramount and all of our ancillary DVDs and distribution, I felt that Showtime was the perfect place to take this. And that was the first and only place we ever pitched it to.
Wasn't it an executive at Showtime was also in the original pitch meeting? I remember reading that at some point.
Well, there was a guy named Gary Levine who had been at ABC as a very junior exec when we did the show. He wasn't hugely materially involved with the show, but he was like minding it for a while from a network point of view. And Gary then was the second in command at Showtime, so that didn't hurt at all. And he came to that second meeting, so it all started to feel like it might fit together, and then, it did.
But you have such a gift for tying mystery and history together to create one, especially in the Secret History and the Final Dossier and everything. Would you be interested in doing like a Jack Parsons and Marjorie Cameron show? I feel like what a wealth of interesting stories, and you covered in the Secret History, especially Marjorie Cameron. I find her fascinating, and you're so gifted with the occult and everything. Would that ever interest you?
I seem to recall somebody, I think, did a Jack Parsons story not too long ago.
Oh, they did. Okay, then I'm not aware of that.
Which I don't think many people saw. But if people don't know who he was one of the early developers of what became the rockets that took us to the stars. I mean, guy who grew up falling in love with the idea of blowing things up and then eventually shooting them into the sky. And he became a central figure in the early days of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory at Caltech. He was a very erratic, borderline crazy guy who had a lot of personal problems and issues. And I felt he was a fascinating story to examine as part of The Secret History. By the way, The Secret History is back in print and out if people are looking to pick up. I know that it had been out of print for a couple of years. And if you don't want to pay an exorbitant amount of money, for a secondhand book, it's in bookstores now.
Yeah, it's an affordable copy, unlike the Access Guide to Twin Peaks. Is there any way you can put that book back in print because it never was reprinted?
Well, to be honest with you, of the 3 books we did, that was because we were committed to do 3, and obviously Laura's Diary, I did the story, and Jennifer Lynch did a wonderful job writing the book. The Access Guide was kind of a throw-in, and we didn't really. I mean, it was meant to be kind of a jokey, fun thing. So I wouldn't accept it necessarily as canon.
It's interesting too when you think about The Return, because there is, well, first off, the Cooking Quinoa with David Lynch film that he made. He talks about when he was on a train trip in the 60s and he saw a frog moth.
Moths were flipping and flying and like frogs. Frog moths were pulling themselves out of the earth and flying up in front of the stand.
But there's also an illustration of a frog moth in the Access Guide. I don't think David Lynch necessarily was like, put this in here. Maybe he did. But it just seems like one of those wonderful coincidences that exist in your world that in retrospect, you see these connections that maybe weren't there.
Well, we did, as we were writing episode 8, which, is sort of the central pillar of The Return, which came out of my need. And I pitched this to David. I said, we need to give Bob some kind of an origin story. That was the notion. And I do remember the moment he brought up the idea of the frog moth. And that was something that we had talked about before. I mean, it was, so it made perfect sense to use it here. And it's obviously pretty eerie in terms of its implications.
Oh, it's horrifying. Yeah. It's brilliant. And what a gift. I don't know if people realize like the gift that we got, that you own it, that you and David owned it, because there is a timeline, whether Cooper goes back to mess with it or not, in which maybe ABC owned it. And could you imagine the how many times it would have been rebooted? The fact that you have such, both of you never sold it out.
Yeah.
You were always careful with how it was used. That's why The Return, I mean, you think about The Return, it could have been a nostalgia fest, but intentionally, it's like you're holding Cooper back to it's so smart and it's so good at that. But thank God you owned it. What do you want the legacy of Twin Peaks to be in the years ahead and the years down the road, about how people look back on it? How do you want people to remember it?
I would love it to be like a family heirloom that people pass down from one generation to the next. And we're already into like our 3rd, verging on 4th generation of people who have been exposed to it. And there's the legacy right there. I mean, it wasn't limited to America. I mean, it had a global impact, which we didn't really even realize at the time. It landed in different ways in different cultures all around the world. And it continues to be looked at and thought of in a slightly different way than shows that might be its contemporaries or predecessors. And that was what I was always hoping to do. I said, I remember having a conversation with David. Most television is utterly disposable, and network television in particular, before the streaming generations had come along. It was meant to lull people into a state, I guess, of suggestibility.
Right, so you can sell them dishwasher detergent or whatever.
Deodorant or whatever it is you're pitching. And I said, let's reverse the paradigm. They make them have to pay attention while the show's actually on. And that weirdly seemed kind of revolutionary. See, again, I grew up hearing my dad talk about every week in America in the 1950s, you could watch a teleplay by Rod Serling or Gore Vidal, or Reginald Rose, or Paddy Chayefsky, and all these incredible guys who later went on to become the next great generation of filmmakers like Sidney Lumet and John Frankenheimer. The list is endless, plus all the great stars that were in New York at that time, who later dominated Broadway and the movies in ways that are unforgettable. So that was what television. Yeah, I mean, there was Uncle Milty and Howdy Doody and all that other stuff, but there was also this, and that was the crown that kind of made television special. And I thought, why can't we do that again?
Yeah. And you did. You did. I mean, you look at the talent that went through Twin Peaks, and that's people talk about the golden age of television. They're directors that came out of the environment that you set up for them. It's fascinating.
It was, I mean, I've talked about it a fair amount now, and some really good books have been written about it. Scott Meslow's got a very good one out now, if you haven't seen it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And because I would like Twin Peaks to be seen, I think, in its proper historical context. And I would like people, I hope, to keep watching it, and find reason to watch it.
I think they definitely will. And you can tell, like, even you see the Laura Palmer theme on TikTok popping up, and there always seems to be a new generation of people. And I think it's because of your ideas and the words, and then David Lynch's use of abstract and painting and abstract concepts that invites contemplation. Like if it was just a basic, completely, this is this, and here's the ending, and it's exciting, you'd have forgotten about it. But it's because there's so many unanswered questions that I'm at 51, I'm still thinking like, why did this happen?
Yeah.
Because you're working with David Lynch, who's painting in abstract concepts and of your own material. Have you ever watched the end result and then learned something new about your own work, having seen it? Because I write comic books and graphic novels and stuff, and sometimes you put together a script and you sort of, it's not that you don't know what the story is going to be about, but the story reveals itself to you, or the meanings, or you start to see hidden things.
Yeah.
And that happens sometimes with the artwork. And I'm wondering if that happens as it's going through him, it's going through the actors and everything.
Oh yeah, no, there's an axiom in television, because television is a factory, basically, particularly network television, and all you're trying to do is keep the production monster at bay, and not run over time or money and all those things that will cause people to fire you. We had a different approach to this. We wanted, in every instance, and David's particularly good at this, it's called beat the page on the stage. If you can take what's written and make it even better when you're on the stage, putting it on its feet, getting the actors to work with you. David, there was nobody better than David at that. He was brilliant with actors, and he consistently beat the page. And so that became my motto for what there were certain filmmakers I wanted to come in and play in our playground, in our sandbox, who I knew would be capable of that. Some weren't, but many were. And so yeah, that created a kind of laboratory of fun and almost experimental storytelling for the smaller screen, and it was fun while it lasted.
Yeah, it was such a unique moment in time as well. Like you talk about coincidence.
Coincidence and fate figure largely in our lives.
You're at ABC at a time when they really need you.
Yeah.
You're able to produce the show yourself. I've heard you talk about when you were looking for the location scouting, you couldn't really find something at the last minute. They're like, oh, check this out. And it's everything that you need. It's like the stars really did align to give you, both of you, free reign to kind of do what you, especially that first season. I mean, it doesn't air. You create the whole thing before it goes out.
Yeah.
And it's just such a magical set of circumstances that we're all benefiting from.
Well, thank you for that. It's nothing that you can create unless the doors open for you somehow. And they did, as you say, the stars aligned, and then it happened again, which made me think maybe that isn't a coincidence. Maybe it's something to do with this particular alchemy of the people involved.
After you did The Return, you've done 2 books at this
Mhm.
point. Do you feel I've told the Twin Peaks story and I'm happy with it, or there's still like lingering ideas or things that you fell in love with that you wish you could sort of see farther out?
Maybe losing David makes that slightly more problematic. It's hard to imagine going back to that world without him, because it's a place we created together. So that's something I'm going to think long and hard about.
Now, the Return for me feels like it's a story about stories. Like there's so many different little interesting stories of all kinds and genres in this entity. And even Twin Peaks itself is a story inside of a larger story that characters maybe are moving in and out of and everything.
Uh-huh.
You're clearly someone that loves storytelling, but how important do you think storytelling is for humanity and for connecting with people and for hopefully changing? I realize this is a loaded question,
Well, it's a big
but
one.
it's a big one. And I ask because I have a fear, and it's like Garland Briggs, like the possibility that love is not enough, is
Mhm.
that I worry that stories aren't enough because I just feel there's so many people that aren't connecting. And I feel like I always wanted to believe that story, if you can connect with someone's heart and you can change the world and all of these things, and you see how many awful people usually in power at this point in time that aren't affected by that. You just look at the religious people that say that they love the Bible but completely miss the stories of Jesus. Is that something you ever worry about, or do you still believe and talk me off the ledge and tell me I'm wrong and everything's going to be fine?
Well, I still absolutely believe that that's the case, and I believe that's what will help push back this darkness. Um, there's a there is evil in the world. We know that this is a persistent problem in humanity, and it's something I've written about and wrestled with thematically most of my life because it's a hard nut to crack when you feel how much human potential there is in the world and how things could be if we could just simply move past being Neanderthals. You know, there is and that and there's a pendulum that swings back and forth through history where there is big moments of reform and there's always a reactionary pushback. I just feel like we're in the most extreme reactionary pushback of my lifetime, and I've been around for a while, in the middle right now, but it's gonna go back the other way. This is not going to succeed because, number 1, these people are stupid, and they're heartless to a large degree, and they're missing the whole point of the value of human connection, and in many cases, they're utterly lacking in empathy, which in the past, we would have called sociopathic.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and that's where I get because I've seen people, regular people, and it seems like they don't have the empathy, and then I worry our stories only hit people with empathy that you've already connected with. So how do we get those kind of stories in their hands for them to touch them? But I take your point. I wanna look at it in the best possible light. This is a good segue actually to jump in because I want to talk about your book, The
Yeah.
Yankee Sphinx, especially FDR.
Mhm.
Such an interesting character, and Eleanor Roosevelt as well in the book. But one of the things that your great uncle is writing about, from my understanding, you're taking from his journals, is trying to get to know FDR. And it reminds me a little bit of Frank Herbert, who wrote the novel Dune, is what he talks about with charismatic leaders ought to come with a warning label on their forehead.
Mhm.
And he talks, even, in your book, you talk about sometimes he worries that he's just using people or he's getting what he wants. Does he ever have any meaningful connection with people? And that's sort of the arc of the book is learning about him and getting into him. And I just wonder, do you worry about leaders like that, about avoiding leaders like FDR, even when their benefits are so great? Because not all of them are benevolent kings, as Will says in the book. And it's, you don't really know. And so you put your hopes into these types of leaders, and you don't always know what you're going to get on the other side.
That's true. I think we also have to look at each case in the context of their own time, because the needs of humanity from decade to decade can vary drastically, and much of it is circumstantial. America had been up until that point, if you look back at the history of political movements and the way working people were treated, um, what we now think of as the Republican mindset had been in the ascendant for decades and decades and decades. The Gilded Age at the late part of the 20th century, which seems to be the spirit of which seems to be what these grandees we at the moment are trying to evoke. And as this is somehow the golden age. Well, it is for a very tiny sliver of people, and it was actually FDR's fifth cousin Teddy who organized the first pushback against all of this in his time in office, when he decided to break up some of these trusts and go after profiteering and go after ill treatment of people. And he set the standard for the family, as what a leader could be and should be capable of doing. So Franklin grew up with that. They were two branches of the family. Teddy's was Long Island, wealthy, commerce-based part, and Franklin's side were more sort of dreamy, egalitarian aristocrats. So to have him emerge as he did as the next golden boy in American politics, which he emerged in the teens in a way. And that's when my uncle met him. He was covering him at the Navy Department during World War I for the Washington Post. So they forged a friendship when they were both kind of in their young adulthood. And it was a meaningful one for both of them. They had then separated after the war ended. They were both in Paris for the Versailles peace treaties, at which point Will stayed overseas and became a foreign correspondent. And Franklin came back to America, soon after was stricken with polio and vanished from public life for a good 7 years before he emerged again in 1928. So he had this grounding of this friendship and this kind of collaboration, a journalist and a source, that then became the basis for their friendship when he eventually hired him to be his correspondence secretary in 1934.
And that's a fantastic scene in the book, because you really take the reader into their lives. And your great uncle is not doing that well at the time that he gets that call. So there's also the character, but it's a real person, Harry Hopkins. His story is absolutely fascinating. And I think coffee, booze, and cigarettes is what he's using to treat his sickness. And I mentioned Eleanor Roosevelt. Fascinating story to hear about her. Not only the affairs that you sort of talk about and how certain ones are accepted, but her life and how hard her life was, getting moved around to all of these boarding schools. I think it's like boarding schools for like unloved rich people or whatever. I can't remember the language that you use. It's really an excellent story. I mean, it's considered historical fiction, so I imagine you're doing some changes for narrative reasons. And I wanted to ask you, when you're dealing with history, that if somebody's going to read this and they're going to take history from this, do you think it's more important to get like all of the facts right, or the emotional weight of the moment?
Well, I think they're equally important. And I think that's what the advantage that historical fiction has over straight textbook history, which is an esteemed, and I'm one of the people who esteem it, profession that has rigorous academic and professional standards that good historians adhere to, or they are basically kicked out of the tribe. Historical fiction has emerged in the last 30 years as a different way of looking at history. I think the Jeff Shahara's books about Gettysburg, The Killer Angels, which became the basis of that wonderful film they made about Gettysburg for WTBS years ago, was the first, I think, to be sort of talked about in this way. I did it a little bit in a couple of my early books, among them The Greatest Game Ever Played, which is about a golf tournament that changed the course of that sport, and in some ways was very reflective of broader changes going on in the culture. Um, I had a long talk. I did an appearance at the FDR Library on the tour, and I sat down with Bill Davis, who is the archivist and the head of the library, and he's become a good friend of mine. And we talked about this at length. If historical fiction is the way that you get people to ingest history and to understand it better and to feel their way through a story instead of just being told a recitation of facts. The facts in the Yankee Sphinx are very well sourced, and I had my uncle's diaries, which he published in 1958, which, a trained, really top-notch professional journalist was keeping meticulous notes during the war years because Franklin was under a security blanket and a blackout, and no one was going to know what that life was like for those pivotal years. And he took it upon himself to create a historical record. Um, so that was the gift that he sort of left us. And he gave me a copy of the book when I was 11 years old, that I carried around my whole life. And I suddenly felt we were in a period in history that was eerily similar to what they were going through, the 1930s, and what this country went through, not just fighting the war that eventually came to our shores, but the fascism that was growing within our own body politic. That was a desperate fight, as it turned out. And the war changed that. The war galvanized everybody to fight against fascism. And Franklin was at the forefront of galvanizing Americans. And so the threat was diminished. It didn't take long for it to come back after the war. And what you then understand is this is a persistent problem in American history. And it's rooted in faults that were basically present when we created the country, because we had 13 colonies with 13 different points of view and one gigantic disagreement about how enslaved peoples should be treated.
And you don't shy away from it's not like FDR is painted in just one light. Like, I appreciated you taking the time to talk about like the Japanese internment camps and then getting some insight into what he thought about that afterward. And so he's such a complicated man. You clearly were well versed in FDR before, but coming away from this, going through your great uncle's journals, being in the room, so to speak, did you come away with a different version of FDR than the one that you had prior?
Yeah. No, I mean, I had to give the book a through line, and because I was writing it in my uncle's voice, it's first person narrative. I'm channeling his voice. I want him to now tell the story that he witnessed. That was the way I wanted the book to feel. And that's what it is. He's the fly on the wall. He's the guy in the room. But he needed more than that. He needed to have a reason for why he was there and what he was trying to learn. And from what I could gather, that for him meant I need to understand this famously opaque and hard to read, amazing character, because I think I can help him if I know him better. I can help him more. And so he undertook that as a task, and that becomes the quest in the book for him. And I think that's what we go on that journey with him, and we hopefully discover just what did make Franklin tick and why by the time we get to the conclusion.
It's a great read. I'd recommend everyone pick that up. It's available now.
I do want to make the point, Eric, this is a great Father's Day present. Nobody knows what to get dads for Father's Day. It's usually a tie or some golf balls but I'd say, hey, why don't you get a book for your dad this year?
It's a perfect gift. Do you have any other projects that you could talk about? Maybe you're thinking of doing, or any chance you'll return to visual storytelling, whether it's television or film or anything coming up?
Yeah, I mean, I'm working on a couple of things. One of the last of the 3 golf books that I wrote, which was actually the most popular of them, is called The Match. It was published in 2009, and I've been working with a producer to try to get it made for years. We may be inching closer to getting that done, which would be fantastic. I hope that happens in the near future. I've got a couple of other book projects that are kind of on the back burner, cooking away. But I haven't made any decisions yet about what I'm going to do next.
I know you're on Blue Sky, right?
I mean, I still have a footprint on Twitter. There's a good community for both, on both formats. I can't go to Twitter for all sorts of obvious reasons.
No, I can't. I left too. And for someone like me that's not very well known, you kind of need it in some sense. But it was like, what am I giving? What am I really gaining?
Yeah.
By keeping this account and funneling into this night, like why am I even doing it? And same thing with Instagram. I'm still using Instagram, but we're just fueling these AI models that will ultimately destroy us in a way. Not because they're going to take over, but because they will completely, ruin the culture. It's hard. It's hard.
And I was just writing about this the other day. Literacy rates in this country have dropped 3% a year for the last 20 plus years. And if we're not reading, we're losing an essential part of what made us different from other species. And I think we need to be organized, and I think we need to fight against the forces that are asking us to become tools in their diabolical, infernal machines. Um, there's darkness in those people, and there's something missing in them.
No, it's bad dads. It's like a bad dads all the way down. I mean, you find some of these guys and they've all had the worst dad and they'll become the worst dad. And it's just.
Yeah, no, it's a toxic legacy. And I don't know, maybe we ought to give the matriarchy a try for 100 years or so.
I'm happy to try that. We got to do something. You mentioned literacy rating go down. I saw like some study as well as just critical thinking is completely flatlining because now everyone is using AI, ChatGPT or whatever, to answer even the most basic questions, so that you'll get to a point where you're unable to think for yourself. They'll raise the rates so that only the ultra wealthy will have access to these tools, and then everyone else will just be.
The end point of that, sadly, looks a lot like the movie WALL-E.
No, I think you're right. And who wins? Like you can only have so much money if there's no world to enjoy it in.
It's baffling to me because I've met a lot of these people over time, and I've never met a billionaire who's seemed like they had much of a spark of humanity in them. And right now we have a billionaire problem. That's where I think you can point a lot of fingers and say, this needs to be addressed. The income inequity that is created by these idiots, and as they're celebrating their own egos and their own relatively minor achievements that have been overblown into because they made so much money.
That's the key. They made just like Twin Peaks was a wonderful moment in time. So was the internet boom. Once you hit that point of wealth, You'll never go. Mark Zuckerberg lost $80 billion on metaverse that no one wants, and now they're just laid off. I don't know how many thousands of people, and he's fine. I don't know exactly the numbers, but I heard it's Jeff Bezos' ex-wife had whatever she won in the settlement. It was like $30 billion. She donated half of it.
Yeah.
And you would think now she would have less. She has more than she had at the time. You can't give it away fast enough.
I know. When you've got that much immense wealth, they could literally solve all the problems that humanity is facing. Instead, because they're so broken and so sick in many ways, they're doing just the opposite. So it's up to us. We've got to figure out a way to marshal our resources as people in what's still a gasping for air but functioning democracy. The midterms are going to tell a lot, and I'm very optimistic about them at the moment.
Well, I like to hear that you're optimistic because it makes me optimistic because sometimes I worry. I feels like, you can only pull the football away so many times before Charlie Brown's going to be like, wait a minute.
Flat on his back again, but maybe this doesn't get up. Yeah, I know. We'll see. I mean, got to live one day at a time in the meantime.
I got to tell you, I was going to make things. I was going to be a writer. I think the check was in the mail. But your show completely rewrote my DNA. I'll never be able to say thank you enough for giving me Twin Peaks at the time that I needed to see it. And I've been chasing that dream ever since. So this has been such an honor and a pleasure to meet you and talk with you and discuss some of these things.
Well, it was a really great conversation, Eric, and I really enjoyed meeting you too. But it made me think when you said you were 15 when you saw it, the show that, I mean, obviously I grew up, Twilight Zone, Outer Limits, then Star Trek was a big deal for me. But the show that really kicked me in, it sounds like in a similar way that Twin Peaks did for you, was one summer, I think it was the summer of 67 or 68, CBS aired Patrick McGowan's The Prisoner as a summer replacement series, and it freaking blew my mind.
Yours is number 6.
I am not a number. I am a person.
And I suddenly saw, it was like a mind-expanding drug. I suddenly saw ways in which storytelling could reach a whole other level. And then shortly after that, I think it was the very next year that 2001 came out. But those two things for me were incredibly formative in realizing that you can not just tell a story to entertain people. You might be able to do it to change them in some positive way. And and you can't determine what that's going to be. All you can do is put it out there and then see what the effect is. But that was always my hope and ambition. And so Twin Peaks was the first time I really had a canvas and a partner and a platform where I was able to put that theory into play. And here we are, 37 years later.
Again, sir, thank you so much. I'm going to let you go. You gave me well above and beyond what you had promised, so I appreciate that.
Happy to do it, Eric. Be well. I'll talk to you soon, I hope.
Thank you for listening to the Meanwhile podcast with Dan Johnson and Eric Grissom. If you would like to support the Meanwhile podcast, join our Patreon. It's available right now. You can sign up, and for just a few dollars a month, you can keep this show going, and you can get access to some exclusive podcasts and some secret stuff that you're not going to find anywhere else. So if you'd like to join, go to ericgrissom.com/meanwhile and look for the Patreon link. If you like our show, please consider rating and reviewing the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're hearing this now. Meanwhile is produced by Eric Grissom and Where's My Robots? The Meanwhile theme song is written and performed by Paul Finn and Evening Pines. If you want to let us know what you thought of the show, you can reach Dan at danjnj.com, both on the web and on Blue Sky. Eric can be found on Blue Sky at ericgrissom.com, which is also his website. It's also me, right? That's weird. We'll see you again, and in the meantime, be good.
Listen to the sounds.
Me no